Hi everyone, welcome to a new tutorial. We are going to be starting a brand new cat drawing today. It's been a long time since I drew a cat, especially in colored pencil. I think it's been like 9 months since I drew a cat with colored pencil, so I thought it would be time. It was about time to do another one. And I will be doing a Bengal cat, and those are beautiful cats. Also pretty wild looking when it comes to the coloring and beautiful eyes. So I figured this would be a really nice one to do. And also this will be a full body drawing. So here I have the head in frame, but I'll be doing the full body. So here we'll see the paws, and then he's laying on something of which I'm not sure what it will be. Probably some kind of blanket that I will be drawing here, but I'm not sure what kind of color yet. So I think I'll just leave that and do the cat first and then do the blanket he's laying on at the very end. So this reference photo was provided by an Instagram follower of mine, and she tagged me in one of her photos. And at the time I was looking for a cat photo to draw, but I didn't really start searching yet. And then I got tagged in one of her cat photos, and I really like this cat. So she has two cats, Mila and Louie. I think this is Louie, but I'm not sure. It's a really pretty cat, and I'm really excited to draw it. So I'm drawing on 12 by 16, so it will be a rather large drawing. It will take a long time to complete, so I hope I'll be able to get it finished this month. And then it is a full body drawing, so I will not be focusing on drawing every single little hair on the face. I'll be looking more at the overall image and just making sure that everything is nicely balanced. And then the paws are actually sticking forward the most. So those are the details I want to put the most time in. So I really want the paws to be very detailed. And of course the eyes as well. But for this one, it's not too important to make the head super detailed. As always, I'm working with polychromos and also a white Caran d'Ache luminance. And for this one, I'll also be using the indenting tool or the dotting tool to indent the whiskers with, because you can see the white whiskers sticking out really nicely, overlapping the body. And because they overlap the body, you really see them really well, the whiskers. So I'm indenting those so they will appear when you go over with color. So really recommend to get one of these. This is a dotting tool. When you Google dotting tool or nail art tool, you will find something like this. Okay, so let's get started. I have the line drawing already down. I traced it real quickly so we can get on to the coloring right away. And first, let's indent the whiskers. So let's zoom out a little bit. He also has some forehead whiskers. But let's do the muzzle whiskers first. And I'm pushing quite a lot because I want these whiskers to be really nicely indented, because then they stay really nice and white when you go over with color. So I try to move fast so that you don't get wobbly lines. And of course, they don't need to be exactly the same as the photo. And when you look at your paper from an angle, you will see the indents. To make sure they are nice and natural looking, I have to make sure that they are all going in slightly different directions, and some are overlapping as well. If they are all the same, it will just look very stiff. So I'm going to make one go upwards a little. Okay. And then we have some sticking out here from the side of the face as well. Some slightly thinner ones, so there I don't push as hard. And then let's move on to the other side. When you're right-handed, the other side, this side is always a little bit more difficult to get your lines straight. And some whiskers are a little shorter, so try to vary with the length of them. Okay. And then we have some little forehead whiskers right above the eye, coming from this stripe right here. Right, 3 little ones, and then the other side. Alright, so that's it for the whiskers. Let's see if we can indent more to save some time on the fur texture. I'm going to do a little bit of indenting, but not too much, on the forehead, where the fur is light. So just in between the eyes. Drawing some tiny little hairs with the indenting tool. Alright, so that's it. Then maybe also on the chest, where you see some tiny white hairs overlapping here and there. So now we can already start to look at the direction of the fur. And I'm just here and there drawing a little row of indents, which will help a little with the fur texture. We don't need any on the body, and we don't really need any on the paws either. All right. We want that really nice fluffy effect. But when you have to draw around all those little hairs working from light to dark, it will just take so much time to do this. Some artists like to use a knife, a slice tool, to pull out all those little hairs, but I don't have a slice tool, so using the indenting tool beforehand to speed up this process a little. So I just drew some of the really nice tiny hairs coming from the paws, or from this front paw right here. And just some of the most prominent little hairs I see sticking out on the forearm and the chest. Okay, so that's it for the indenting. Let's with part 1, and that is the eyes. And I hope to do the whole face in part 1, but I'm not sure how much time this face is going to take me. But let's just get started with the eyes and see how far we get. So let's start with outlining the eyelids first. And I see a brownish tone in the eyelids. So that means I'm going to start with, let's start with, what's this called again? Caput Mortem Violet 263. I'm going to use this to outline the eyes with. Rather use this instead of just straight black right away. That would look a little bit flat. So very lightly I'm going to outline the eyelid, also the iris right here. Okay, so then we have the inner corner of the eye, which is a little bit dirty. So here we don't see much prominent outlining. Let's do the other eye straight away. This Caput Mortem Violet color is a color that fits both the color of the eyelid and also the color of the fur. So for this one, it's a good color to start with. Light base layer. This side as well. It's really lightly because I also want to add some other colors. Alright, so now let's move on with the darker color and slightly more neutral. So this is dark sepia, 175. With this I can start darkening up the eyelids. And then moving on to the other eye, darkening up the darkest areas. You don't see much eyelid at the top, but you do see a shadow here. Keep looking at the eyes to see if they are still the correct shape. Alright, so then I also want to involve a little bit of a blue tint in the eyelids. So I will take Payne's Gray 181 and also add that on top. Especially this eyelid is not extremely dark. I see loads of different colors in it. And this eyelid fades a little bit into the fur. So I'm softening up the edges by releasing my pressure and just draw tiny circular motions. This inner eye corner is pretty dark and also has a bluish tone, so I'm just adding a little bit of Payne's Gray there as well. Alright, so now to darken up the darkest lines, I am going to take some black and just add that around the very outlines of the eye. Make sure it's very sharp. Okay, maybe finally tiniest bit of extra Caput Mortem violet, and then I'm going to do a little bit of burnishing on the eyelids, and then the eyelids are done. We don't need super tight outlines on these very outside edges, but I do want the eyes themselves to be really nicely outlined. Okay, taking the Caran-d'Ache, making sure that it's very sharp. And just going over the eyelids a little bit, not too much, just to smooth it out. Alright, so let's move on with the insides of the eyes. First, I like to map out the pupils a little. I'm going to do that with the Payne's Gray 181 color. I hope you can see that. I hope it's in focus. Okay, so now it's sharp. It wasn't completely sharp. Okay, so that is the Payne's Gray 181. And I'm going to look real closely at the shapes of the pupils because they're very nicely shaped. They're not just ovals. And then there's a highlight going through it as well. So I need to go around that a little. This is just to get an idea of the basic shape of the pupils, and then we can compare them. See if the cat is looking in the right direction. Okay, during the coloring we can do some adjustments in the shape of the pupils, but I just want to make sure that they are both in the correct place. Rather start them a bit too small. You can always make them larger, but it's really hard to make them smaller. So I'm just leaving them like this, and let's start the base layering. Getting a bit of walnut brown, 177, because here I see the edge of the iris and then a tiny bit of white next to it. So we need to leave open a little bit of eye white. It's just a tiny piece. So I'm sketching that out a little. And then we have a very dark brownish blob in the inner corner of the eye. And I can also use the walnut brown for some basic shading, some shadows in the corners and at the top of the eye. So it's too small of an area to do so many details. So I just want to make sure that the basic toning of the eye is correct and that it looks nice and glassy. But it's too small to do all those little veins in it, so those are not really important for this drawing. I am filling in the brown blob in the center or in the right corner. And the shadow in this eye, they look more bluish. I can do a little bit of walnut brown here at the top. And of course, we're going to work around all the highlights that you see. So all the bright highlights, especially this one in the corner, we're going to leave that open. Okay. So let's get started with some basic shades of yellow and green that I see. I'm just going to start off neutral and build up to the most vibrant colors. So I'm going to get started with Ivory 103 for a base layer on the whole iris. This one is a little darker, so I'm just going to add a little bit of ivory there too. You don't really see the ivory, but it does create a nice base layer on the paper. All right, and then the other one. Going around all the highlights. Okay, and then I also see some green. So here I've got earth green 172. I'm also going to add this. So right here in the corner, I see quite a lot of green. And I'm just working in tiny circular motions with very light pressure. Focusing on the more dark areas on the eye, you can see this part, the inner corner is very yellow, very bright, so I'm not going to add any green right there. Just keeping it around the iris mostly. Not too much yet, you can always add more. And then also the other one. So this eye is a little darker. There's more shadow in this eye, so I can add more of this green. Still in very light pressure, but maybe go over several times. Then we have a highlight here on the very edge. Going to go around it. Okay, so with this subtle color change, you already get the glassy effect. And I just want to keep enhancing that. I also want to add a bit of blue in there. Let's go for a bit of a brighter blue. Let's see what I have. Where is my ultramarine? Maybe I need to go a tad darker than that. Indanthrene blue. That's 247. Indanthrene blue. I'm just going to add a tiny bit of this at the top. Maybe even make the eyes a little bit more vibrant than they are on the photo. So I'm not treating this drawing as a pet portrait that I would do as a commission. If it was a commission, I would create the cat exactly as I see it on the photo. But right now it's not a commission, so we have some more freedom to change colors if we want to. I want to add a little bit more blue. So this is just the basic tone of the eye, so I'm ignoring all the little details that I see. And then here also some blue, mainly at the top for the shadow. Now we see that highlight appears well. This is going to be a real long tutorial. Alright, so now I feel I can brighten up the yellow in the eyes again, both eyes. So I'm going to get some really nice vibrant yellow tone. Let's do this one. Dark Naples Ochre 184. Sharpen that again, and then I'm going to lightly glaze that, especially here in the inner corner. And then also right here in the other eye. Bottom, maybe also in the inner corner. Just a little, you don't need to push. All right. So this right eye, it's darker in the corner, it's darker overall, so I think I need a bit of a different tone to finish that eye. I think I'm going to go for brown ochre, that's 182. Doing that in the inner corner. Still small circular motions to make sure that all the colors blend together nicely. Gonna use this also in the other eye. Yeah, let's do a little bit of, what was it? Brown ochre? at the top of this eye. Maybe at the bottom as well. You want to make the edges slightly darker than the center to increase that 3D effect in the eye. And then I just wanted to keep darkening up because we need to go darker even. I also want to put in some more green again, some brighter green. So I'm going in with earth green yellowish, 186. Still working on that base tone of the eye, no details yet. Just adding layers in the base tone until I'm happy with the base tone, and then we can go on and do some detailing. Well, actually I like this smooth look on the eye, so I don't want too much detail. I do want more shadow, so let's move to Payne's Gray 181. It's a more neutral bluish tone, and I can use this to increase the shadows at the top. The top eyelids are casting a shadow over the top half of the eye, so the top half needs to be nice and dark. Going around the highlights. All right. Other one. All right, so that's it for all the base tones. If you add too many colors together, it might get muddy, so let's keep it like this. Let's darken up the iris. Also add a little bit of a Payne's Gray base layer in the white of the eye, just like I did with the other one. I do need to add more brown to that blob in the inner corner of the eye, the left eye. So I'm taking the walnut brown again, working on that blob. I'm not sure what that is, just a discoloration in the eye maybe. And I also see some red in that, so I want to add burnt sienna on top of that, if I can find it. There it is, a little small burnt sienna, 283. Adding it on top of this blob area. Okay. Then I'm going to do a little bit of burnishing on both eyes to push the base tones into the paper, smooth that out. Still no detail. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to take black again, darken up the areas that got lightened up by the layering. Sometimes the burnishing also lightens up some areas too much, so going on the eyelids again, darkening up around the eyes. Still making sure that the shape of the eyes are correct. And then I can also now darken up the pupils. That gives the eyes a lot more life. All right. Getting there with the eyes. I just want to add a bit more depth in them. Going to go with Caput Mortem Violet and just darken up on the right eye in the inner corner. Maybe the shadow at the top. I want to have a nice balance between warm tones and cool tones. So this is a nice warm tone again. I really like the coloring. I don't think I will draw all these little veins and things I see in there. I think that will just be a little distracting, so I do want to do a little bit of detailing. So let's do that now. I'm going to take the Payne's Gray for that, 181, neutral tone, to just do like the little veins and thingies I see. Here and there some lines in the eye following the round shape, but not too much. So adding some wiggly lines. Still going around all the highlights. That's enough for the right one. Now the left one. You actually see some lines in the big highlights on the left. I'm going to add those. Some lines crossing the highlight. All right, now let's see if I want to add any more specific coloring. Maybe let's brighten up the eye by adding even more green. Let's do a really nice bluish looking green. So this is permanent green, 266. That came out weird. 266. Nice bright green. Sharpen that. Because the eyes can still have that extra touch of a vibrancy. So I'm going to glaze that on top. As long as you build up very lightly with the light hand, you can keep adding colors until you're happy. So I really love working gradually like this, from light to dark, not too much pressure. All right, that's nice. And then maybe finally touch of extra blue, indanthrine blue at the top halves. All right, so I like the eyes. I'm going to leave them for now. So now we can move on to the rest of the face, just working around the forehead. Let's zoom out, see what they look like from the distance. So we're going to look at this drawing from a distance anyway, because it's quite large. The eyes look nice from a distance, so that's good. Alright, so let's get started on that fur. So we see lots of different patterns in the fur. We see some darker stripes here on the forehead and then also some darker stripes below the eye. So first, let's start mapping out all those stripy patterns. Just to get an idea of where everything is, I'm going to take Walnut Brown 177. But I'm just going to work super lightly. So we see a little stripe here above the eye. Again, it's pretty small, the head, because the drawing is large and we have the full body on it. So I'm not going to focus on drawing every single hair. More looking at the overall tones and contrasts. I am making sure that I'm always going in the direction of the fur growth, also with the base layers. So you can see that the fur on the forehead right here, it goes upwards. And it's super short, so I'm drawing super short lines. And then I also see a very dark shadow here on the side of the nose. So I'm just putting that in right away. So instead of working section per section, I'm going to look at the overall dark shadows and patterns and just map those out. The nose here is super dark. I'm just starting off lightly. And then next to the eyes, we have some dark shadow or stripe. And then below the eye as well. Then here we have a light strip of fur. I'm going to leave open for now. I'm just going to work around the whole face like this. This will give us so much more of an idea where to go with the colors. Using super light pressure. Let's go underneath this eye as well. Okay, and then the muzzle overall is quite light. Let's outline the nose a little bit as well. Okay, and then in the fur above the eyes, We see some darker shadows in between the hairs, and then the lighter hairs coming in between that. So still with the brown, I'm just going to place down some lines, which is going to imitate the dark hairs in between the light hairs. Make sure to vary a little bit in the lines you're drawing. And make sure to go in the right direction, going upwards. And then on the other side. And this is just to already create some texture. Okay, so now I've created some patterns. Now I can start adding some base layering. So I see lots of oranges in the fur, very nice. I'm going to definitely also put those in. But I want to start rather neutral, so I can always add more vibrant colors on top of that. And that's a little bit safer than going in with all these vibrant colors right away. So I'd rather go with something like Nougat to start with. So that's 178. It's a very warm toned grayish brownish color. Right, so I have this nice and sharp. And I'm starting to add this in the more darker sections of the fur, so not the very lightest areas yet. Like the areas that are getting some shadow. And I'm not really focusing on any fur texture, so I'm keeping the layer very even. But I am making sure to always go in the right direction as well. Then these areas like these sections in between the eyes, I'm leaving open for now. But I can go on top of the darker sections that I just mapped out to give them a bit more color. And then I can do a base layer on all of this forehead fur. Some light layering. And let's go over the cheek area as well. Just filling that in, except for the light strip underneath the eye. All right. And then this nose area is a little bit more reddish looking, and I also see some gray, so I don't think I'm going to add any nougat there. Just on the fur on the cheeks. But I think this is already enough for the nougat. I always like contrasting yellow toned colors with more pinkish colors as well. So I think I'm going to add in some more pink as well, maybe some cinnamon. Yeah, let's go for some cinnamon. So that's 189. That will balance out the yellow. Then after this, I can start adding some more reds as well. And it will also just deepen the color a lot and just look nice. So I'm going to add the cinnamon on top of the nougat. I also see it around the eyes. And I don't need to add it everywhere because I like a bit of variation in the fur. So I'm just going to add it in the more darker sections. All right, so now let's start adding some more red. Also, I want to darken up the patterns so I don't lose them. So let's do that first. I want to add some darker, let's do dark sepia, sticking with the warm tones. So 175. No black yet. I probably won't use any black in the fur because I rather see browns. Need to get this really sharp though. Now I'm going to use a little bit more pressure and darken up all those markings. Okay. Also going to darken up the side of the nose here, which has a really dark shadow. So let's darken that. Let's darken the inner corner of the eye as well. Just going to work on the contrasts a little more. And then we have this stripe next to the eye, which can be darkened up as well. Let's darken up around the nose as well. Fill in the nostrils a little bit. He has quite a weird shaped nose. The nostrils are very small. Okay, so we're starting to get a little bit more shape in the cat now. So let's put in a little bit more color. Let's put in more yellow first. Actually, let's do burnt ochre. Not really a yellow, more like a neutral ochre tone. So this is 187, and a real bright yellow is really going to look off. So I want to stick with the more neutral toned oranges and yellows. Some glazing with this will look really nice. So still very lightly. So this will just take quite some time to get layered. So this photo is taken inside, which sometimes means that the lighting affects the colors of the fur. So it might be that the lighting inside is a little warm, which causes the fur to be even more warm than it already is. You can see these strips underneath the eye also look very yellowish. So I think I want to balance that out a little more. Leave the strips underneath the eye a bit more like grayish, maybe some pink, but I don't want to make everything so yellowy. Get a bit more balance in the fur tone. I've already put in quite some yellow for my style. Usually I use more pinks in this type of fur. Still keeping open all the light areas and the bridge of the nose for now. I want to make sure to have all the dark areas done first. So on these dark patterns, I also see some purplish hue. So I want to add some Caput Mortuum Violet to deepen the colors as well. So that's 263. Get that nice and sharp. And just go over all these patterns once again. And also add this in the more shadowy areas. This is a really nice shadow color for warm tones. Still keeping the pressure nice and light. Still not worrying about the hair texture too much. I'd like that really soft effect in this drawing. Just making sure I have Nice color transitions everywhere. No harsh lines, just all shadows. Let's put in some red. Let's start adding some burnt sienna, which is not really red. It's a brownish red, so that's 283. Let's put that in. Still focusing more on the darker sections. This pencil is so small, I can hardly grip it. Need to get a new one. And just lightly glazing here and there. In the forehead area, I can also use some of this. Just here and there, some little lines. I'm not going to fill up the whole area with it because I still want those lighter hairs also show through. So let's get this really nice dark shadow along the muzzle. Let's get that in. That will really push the muzzle forward. On the other side as well. Right, let's make some hairs stick out from the right side of the face. We're starting to get somewhere now with the face. So with these type of fur textures, it's always the hardest to get started and to just know where you have to start. But when you're going, it becomes easier to decide what to do. Okay, so I do want to add a tiny bit more yellow, but not too much. I'm going to do a little bit of glazing with brown ochre 182. That's probably the most yellow that I'm going to be using. Then I'm going to continue with maybe some pink, some blue or purple maybe even. So I'm going to add the brown ochre on the forehead, still glazing with a light touch. Also the fur that is overlapping the ears a little. Tiny bit of brown ochre in the light spots above the eyes as well. Not too much, just a tad. Just a tad of this underneath the eyes as well. Just a little bit. Going to fill this up more with some pinks. Okay, so let's switch to some pink. Where is it? I'm looking for my light flesh or beige red 132. There it is, so let's sharpen that again. So for this drawing, super important to keep your pencil sharp at all times. Otherwise, you can't get into all the nooks and crannies of the paper. So I'm just going to fill up the light areas with this. Just a light base layer. Eventually we want no whites anywhere, only in the highlights and the eyes. I can also do a base layer on the bridge of the nose with this. And on all the super light fur. Then I also want to start glazing in some violets because I like adding violets to basically all my drawings. So let's see where I have that. So that's violet 138, which I'm going to glaze on the white fur underneath the eye, which is not white anymore. On the bridge of the nose, it would also look nice. I'm going to add it there, just with very light pressure because I don't want it to be too overpowering. And also on the very top of the head where the light is hitting, I see some violet hue there. All right, good. So now I can start really hyping up the contrast, getting rid of the paper texture and also adding in some more vibrant colors. Let's start adding a little bit more red, some more vibrant tones. Let's see what I've got. Maybe some Venetian red. But Venetian red is more of a pinkish red, so maybe that's not the right choice. Maybe I need to go for sanguine. So that's a more orangey reddish tone. So that's 188. Definitely I need more depth on the cheeks. So I'm going to add some sanguine to the cheeks. Still working in the right direction. Okay, so that's looking nice. Going to add a little more ivory in these light spots just to darken them up a little more. All right, looking nice. Let's also start working on that bridge of the nose a little more. I actually see some blue there, so I want to add a tad of Indanthrine blue 247 just above the nose, especially in the left corner. There's usually some blue here. Also on the right side. And then I'm also going to add some nougat just to get some of the warmth back in. So that's 178. And I'm also going to glaze that on the bridge of the nose. Not too much though, just a little. Make sure we have no harsh lines anywhere. Just shadows. Okay, and then I want to do a little bit of fur texture on the bridge of the nose. And I want to do that with dark sepia. Get that really sharp because I'll have to draw really small, thin lines. Because the fur on the bridge of the nose is super short. Also, a little bit more shadow on the side of the nose. So we're just working from light to dark, so with each layer I have to darken up the shadows again. And I'm going to add some tiny dots on the bridge of the nose. Not too many. Alright, so now I want to darken up the darks even more. So I want to go back in with the walnut brown, the color that I started with. So that's 177. And darken up the patterns again. And with this I can also start doing some hair texture. So I'm going to place my lines more carefully. Also going underneath the eyes to darken up the patterns underneath the eyes as well. Focusing more on drawing individual hairs right now, lines. Okay, so now we're starting to get some real nice depth in the fur. So we're almost done with the face area, so we still need to do the ears and the muzzle, which will still be in this part. It will be a long part. It will be a rather long tutorial. Alright, so before moving on to the muzzle area and the ears, I do want to add a little bit more darkness because I feel like I'm lacking contrast in the fur a little bit still, so I'm going in with dark sepia. And let's sharpen some of the dark shapes. This area can be darker as well. Just add a little bit more punch to the fur. Sharpen these markings a little bit as well. Add a bit more dark in the tiny hairs on the forehead. Okay, and then I want to add even more color because I feel like now the fur can have a little bit more red or orange. So I'm going to add a bit more of the sanguine now. So that's 188. I'm going to keep glazing it on the cheek until I'm happy with the saturation of the fur here. A little bit on the forehead as well. Just want a little bit more of that orange hue in the fur, so it becomes interesting to look at. All right. Okay, so that's better. So I'm not planning to do a lot of burnishing in the fur. I'm definitely not going to do that too much. I want to add a bit more yellow, a bit more brown ochre, 182. Glaze it on the forehead right here, very lightly, to increase the yellow as well. And then maybe finally a little bit more burnt sienna in the dark areas. Create a bit more fur texture. Okay, so that looks better. So now I'm quite happy with the fur, with the colors in it. So I'm going to continue with the nose. So we can see some pinks in the nose. I definitely can see Venetian red. And then I'm also going to put in some caput mortuum. And maybe some cooler tones as well to contrast that. But I think the Venetian red, so that's 190, will be a good base tone for the nose. So I'm going to cover the nose with a light base of this. Nice neutral fleshy tone, except for the very edge here on the left, because you can see a highlight there. I'm going to draw all the way to the left and keep a tiny border open on the edge right there. And then overall the nose is in shadow, so it's quite dark. But I like to start off light anyway. And then to add some shadow, I'm going to take Caput Mortuum 169. It looks a lot like the Caput Mortuum Violet, but it's more reddish instead of purple. Going to place this mainly on the right side. In this nostril area, you can always darken up the nostrils as well. I don't think the nose needs more than this. So maybe some kohl as well. Maybe a tad of Payne's Gray 181. As a shadow in the center, just to also enhance that cool tone within. Here we have the other nostril. And that's it. So now I can burnish to push the colors into the paper. And then I'll probably just leave the nose like this because it doesn't need much. I am going to darken up the nostrils though with black. Maybe this bottom area as well. Also, I need some blue. I'm going to add some sky blue, 146 above the nose. Increase that shine a little more. Now I'm going to take black because I haven't darkened up the nostrils with black yet. So let's fill those in. Get those nice and deep and tight. That nostril hole actually continues all the way towards the left. Then we have the center line right here. The other nostril, which you can't see that well. This cat has very small nostrils. Maybe it does need a little bit more color actually. So by burnishing you lighten up the color a little. So I think I'm going to add a tad of Caput Mortem Violet. So 263. Just to the center area to deepen that. Get a bit more shape in the nose. And then it's finished. Small circular motions. Right, so like that. Okay, leaving the nose like that. So let's move on to the muzzle area. The muzzle is fairly light compared to the rest of the fur, and it will pop by doing the fur around it. So when I do the chest and make that nice and dark, then the muzzle will really pop. So right now in this stage, it will probably look really flat until I get to part 2. So keep that in mind. It will probably look a little weird at this stage. That's no problem. First, I'm going to outline the mouth line right here, which is a little darker. So I'm going to do that with dark sepia, 105. Just do that lightly. So we have this line here from the nose coming downwards. And then this mouth line, which I'm going to outline very lightly by drawing all kinds of super small hairs. Because we don't want this to be a super tight, dark line. We want it to be a shadow. I'm drawing super light lines, then taking that down just a little. And then this muzzle line actually continues all the way around the muzzle, but here we don't see that dark line anymore on the left, so I'm going to keep that dark sepia just here below the nose. Okay, we can always make it darker, so I'm going to start with this, and then we can also map out all those dots and where the whiskers are coming out of, still with dark sepia as well. I place them in fairly dark right away. Alright, so we have several really dark dots at the bottom, at the top, and then the more you get towards the bottom lines, the lighter they get. Let's do the same on the other side as well. All right. Okay, and then I also need to do this little area on the left, right next to the muzzle, which is pretty light as well, but it does need a little extra base layering. So right next to the muzzle, I'm going in with ivory. And then the whole face will start to pop when I get to that chest area. Actually, I need some gray as well. Going in with cold gray, 232, because I also see some coal next to the muzzle on the left. And then I don't need to keep the whiskers in mind because those will appear naturally when you go over with the pencil like that. And then the same cool gray I'm going to add to the chin. Just a little base layer. It's an area that doesn't catch a lot of light. I'm not going to draw all the way towards the edge. Just the chin in the center and then underneath the muzzle line, the mouth line. This is always a tricky part, to make sure that the muzzle shape stays all right. Then on the chin I also see some pinkish tones, so I'm going to add some cinnamon 189 on top of the gray to give it some more color. I'm doing the chin first because that is the darkest area of the muzzle, so I like to put in the darkest areas first, because then it becomes easier to judge the colors on the rest of the muzzle. And then a tad of violet as well on the chin It's 138. Focusing on sticking with that rounded shape of the muzzle, so I'm correcting that a little bit. Also, now I see that I can darken up the mouth line, so I'm going to do that with brown now, walnut brown, for a little bit more color. Alright, let's do some base layering on the top half of the muzzle as well. So I do see some warm tones. So I'm going to start off with some ivory. Again, 103 if I'm right. Yeah, 103. Just do a little base layering. Mainly on the top half of the muzzle because the bottom half looks more like grayish again. So top half, a little bit of ivory. And then for the bottom half of the muzzle, I'm going to take cool gray, then a lighter gray, cool gray 2, 231. So slightly lighter than the cool gray 3 I just used for the chin. Okay, and now I can enhance the colors a little bit. So I'm going to add nougat to start with. Just a warm, neutral tone. Focusing on the top half of the muzzle, both sides. Actually, the muzzle area doesn't need a lot of color because I do want it to stay a lot lighter than the rest. Around the nose. Making sure to follow the shape of the muzzle and then the direction of the hairs. You don't see many individual hairs, but I'm drawing some tiny lines. I'm going to do a little bit of beige red 132 glazing on the whole muzzle to darken it up slightly. Give it a little bit more base tone. Actually, then we're pretty much done with this. I am going to add a bit more burnt sienna, especially to the top of the muzzle, the top half, which is a little more like reddish. Adding a bit of burnt sienna there. Little individual hairs in those whisker lines. I'm not sure what to call those. Those areas where the whiskers are coming out of. Also on the other side, that side is a little darker, so I can add some more burnt sienna there. Okay, so I'm going to leave the muzzle like this because it will not look finished anyway until I get to this area around it. So when I finish that, it will be easier to judge if I can do anything more on the muzzle to finish it. Right now I'm going to leave it quite unfinished like this, and I can move on to the ears now. Alright, so let's move on with those ears. The ears don't have very many details in them because the light from behind, there's a window behind, it shines through the ears, which makes them transparent looking. The skin is very thin, so you see most of the light coming through. You see some veins there, but not really any dark shadows. You do see some little white hairs here in the insides of the ears. So for that I will do some indenting. But first I'll just start mapping out the outlines of the ears so that I know the shapes a little better. And I'm going to do that with Nougat. You can see some very bright white edges on the ears, but as we're working on a white background, we won't see those. So I'm just going to outline the ears with Nougat, but not too dark. So that's 179. And I'm just lightly going to outline that. Not too sharp, not too tight. Keep an eye on the different shapes you see in the ears. They can be a bit rugged on the edges. Doesn't need to be one completely smooth line. And here we have some bony area. Here we see a vein. It's going all around like that. Just mapping out different shapes. Though we don't have very many different shapes in this ear. And then here's the inside, which looks more darker pinkish. And then here we have all those hairs overlapping, which I'll do some indenting for. going to take that nougat inwards a little bit, just so we don't have that line, we have a shadow. We don't want any dark outlines around the drawing. I'm taking that nougat inwards right away. And then the other one. So here we see a little bit of the back of the ear as well. Right, here we have that vein again. Then we also have some of the hairs from the forehead overlapping the ear. So we also need to spare out some paper for those. Here we also have some hairs overlapping. Quite big ears for this cat. Alright, so let's do the indenting now. I don't need much, but you do see some white hairs coming from the inside of the ear. Making sure to vary with the strokes I draw. Make some hairs overlap. And same on this side. This will save us so much time doing the indenting like this. Okay, so let's start doing some base layering. So I see a mix of yellow tones for the edges and then pinks for the inside. So I'm going to pick some tones. Definitely going to add ivory again, and definitely beige red as well, and cinnamon. And then also a more pinky tone. Let's go for medium flesh. Then I'll probably add some Venetian red as well, so I keep it very neutral. Maybe for the veins I need something like red, but I'll see. I'll save that for last. Maybe I need some gray as well. But let's get started with ivory. And I'm going to place that lightly all around the edges like this in larger circular motions. I don't need to fill up the paper just yet. I just want a little base just to get rid of the white of the paper already. I'm not going to spend too much time on this area yet, we'll get to that. Doing the same for the other one. Lightly placing down a little ivory, though this ear is a little darker, so I don't need too much of that. And then I'm slowly going to work towards the darker colors, so I'm taking beige red 132 now. Going to place that on top of the ivory as well to make the ear just a little darker in this area. Small circular motions, and I'm holding the pencil quite close to the end to make sure that my pressure isn't too high. And you still won't be seeing too much of this. And I'm going to take the beige red all the way inwards. I'm feeling the indents here. Drawing this all the way towards the edge of the ear, where the hair is overlapping. So then we have a little gap here, but I'm going to fill that up. Let's do the ear itself first. And then the same on the other one. Let's just do them both at the same time. Take that all the way inwards. Alright, so going slightly darker again, switching to cinnamon, 189, making sure to sharpen that. And I'm going to place this more on the areas that are slightly darker. So here along the top edge, I see a darker line. Still small circular motions, keeping an even pressure so I don't get any blotches anywhere. This whole outer edge can be darkened up. And here we have a shadow. Here on the very inside we have some shapes. Now we're going to bring some shape in the ear. Right here we see a shadow. Okay, this whole inside area, let's darken it up. And then you can see that shape going all the way towards the top. Making sure to not have any harsh edges anywhere. So I rather use multiple layers with light pressure than pressing hard right away, because then you get lines and blotchy areas. Slowly you can see the indents appear. That's always nice. Alright, so I think this is enough cinnamon. For the real dark tones we need to switch to another color. Also, let's do cinnamon on the other one. All around the edges, making sure we don't have any dark outlines around the ear anymore. I should have taken that nougat inwards just like I did with the other one. But I think I need to go around with even a darker color and take that inwards as well. Trying to go around the forehead hairs sticking out. So I'm going to draw inwards into the hairs and then leaving open some space in between my strokes, creating those hairs with the negative space. Then the inside I can leave a little lighter. Okay, I think I need a little bit more yellow tone again. I see a bit more yellow here in the ear and the other one as well. I'm going to take a brown ochre, 182, and just do a little glaze. So super lightly, almost no pressure. And I just add some extra yellow. Since I discovered working with light pressure like this, I haven't done it this way all the time. I just recently started working so lightly, and it has really helped because it takes off a little bit of the pressure sometimes. Because it's not a very forgiving medium, but if you start so lightly, you can still do so many changes. So I'm really liking this technique so far. So now we have a good base. Now I can start increasing the dark areas. I think I need a little bit of brown. I'm going to take walnut brown, because here this inside area looks quite brown. So I'm just going to layer it lightly, going into the forehead hairs. And just a little bit around the edge of the ears as well. Just adding tiny strokes to imitate some of the tiny hairs on the ears. Then the back side right here is also quite dark. Okay, adding also some darker edges on the other one. And to make sure the outline is not just a line but a shadow, I take it inwards a little bit. Alright, let's start adding a bit more vibrancy to the tone. So I'm going to take some medium flesh, 131, which is not a very dark color, but I'm going to just glaze it a little bit, add some more brighter pink, especially to the shadow areas, but also a little bit as a base tone on the rest of the ear. Okay, so now we definitely need some darker colors. I'm going to take Venetian red now and darken up the insides of the ears. Do need to be a little bit careful around these indented hairs, because if the pencil is too sharp, it will go into the indents a little, and I don't want that. But I do need to darken up this inside of the ear a whole lot, so I'm being quite careful. So my pencil is sharp, but I'm keeping it rather flat on the paper. And I go in very small circular motions. And I'm going over it multiple times to darken up. Let's also draw in this vein you see all around the ear, drawing that in rather sharp. Not too heavy though. It's some more little veins. Taking quite a lot of time for the ears because they are pretty large and I want them to have the same amount of detail as the other parts of this drawing, because it will add a lot of nice realism to it. So I'm just going to take my time for it. And the other one as well. Definitely the inside right here needs to be a whole lot darker. Drawing into the forehead hairs again. And also drawing in that vein. I don't think I need to go with a brighter red for that. Maybe this one is just enough. Okay, so now I've added so much pink and now I feel I can add more yellow again. So I'm going back to that brown ochre color, 182, and I'm going to do another glaze. On the whole ear. Alright, so as always, I always want to glaze some violets. So I'm going to do that as well on the whole ear, just because I like it. It looks good with every color, it deepens the colors. Just a little bit of violets. I also think we need to do some burnishing. And on the other one as well. Alright, now I also want to add some burnt sienna, especially around the edges again, to darken those up. Give them a little bit more depth. So now I'm really going to draw the hairs. The hairs on the ears. And then maybe darken up the inside of the ears as well a little bit with the burnt sienna. So I think I need more of a purple for that. I am going to draw inwards. So I'm taking the burnt sienna and I'm drawing into the forehead hairs to create a better transition of the overlapping hairs. Same on the other side. Darkening up even more, a little bit around the edges. Just take it easy. All right, switching to a little bit of Capital Morton Violet 263. Still darkening up the insides of the ears a little bit more before burnishing. All right, we're getting there. Almost done. Darken up the insides even more. working. Let's make sure we have enough layers everywhere, and then I can do a little bit of burnishing. So let's do that. So we have to make sure that the pencil is very sharp, the luminance, so we can push all the colors into the paper. And then with super tiny circular motions, I'm going to push the colors in. Focusing mainly on the lighter areas on the ear. I don't want to lighten up the darker areas too much, so I'm mainly focusing on the lighter areas, just so you don't see that texture anymore. And the other one. So all the colors we put down show up when you burnish. So the challenge with this ear is to not make it too yellow, because then it will really look very yellow after burnishing. Talking is really hard. But the balance seems to be okay. I do need to do some final little things. I'm going to add another layer of beige red. I can also use this one a little bit as a burnishing color, just to get a little bit more color in without darkening everything up too much again. This is where I increase the pressure. I think I do want to add some more like orange or brighter red tones. So I'm going to add some Sanguine 188, and this will really show up now. These tones will always show up a little more vibrant after burnishing for some reason, so I'm going to be a little careful with it. But I'm adding it along the outer edges. And also enhance the veins with it. Little more medium flesh in the inside. Just keep adding until you're happy with how it looks. And with this one I can also add some of the less prominent veins in the ear. So the ones that are really in the back, not catching so much light. And I'm going to leave the other ear just as it is. I do need a little bit of dark sepia on this start of the ear on the very base on the right. Draw into the fur a little bit more. Then we also need to finish that fur to fill up the gap. Oh, there are also some spots inside the left ear, so I'm going to draw those in as well. Let's do that with dark sepia. Very dark markings. It's a nice little extra detail to do. Okay, so let's finish that fur. First making sure that the shape is correct. The shape of the forehead, the shape of the fur there. And then I just need to continue some of the darker small lines that I drew, the shadows in between the lighter hairs. So I'm going to take my brown again, my walnut brown, make it sharp, and then just continue the texture of the fur upwards a little more. Also just spending some more time on the forehead as well to make sure that the whole shape of the head in general is also correct. Okay, so then continue the dark small lines upwards, not entirely until the edge. The hairs that overlap the ear are actually pretty light. Okay, almost there. And then I'm going to take ivory, doing a little base layer on the gap. So we've already created the texture of the hair pretty much by drawing inwards from the ear. So we don't need to do much on that anymore. But I do need to give it a little base tone, then do some depth in it. Going to take sanguine, drawing some hair texture, some lines. All the way towards the ear. Leaving open some space, so we also have some very light hair showing through. Doing some final detailing, some extra glazes, adding some more violet to the very top of the forehead to lighten it up, or make sure it's hit by light. It looks like that. A little bit more violet on the bridge of the nose as well, as that is catching light. Okay, so it's starting to look more like a cat already. Or actually, it does look like a cat. Would be worse if it wouldn't look like a cat yet. But we're getting there, and part 1 is almost finished. And I think this is actually the most difficult part. The body is a little bit less tedious to do, but it will take a lot of time. Alright, so I think we are more or less done. Going to do some extra burnt sienna on the forehead here and there to add some extra shadow. So I'm going in between the hairs now. Darkening up in between some of the little hairs. Fur is super short, so I need to keep my lines super short. Alright, so I think this will be part 1. Yep, so let's leave part one. Let's zoom out a little to see what this looks like from a distance. Eventually we're going to look at this drawing from far away. So it's good to take a step back and look at your drawing from a distance. So it looks nice now. So I hope you liked it. This is part one. I'll see you in part two.